r/ProRevenge grandma called me a fat pig, so I got her disowned by family. You're nothing but a fat pig who's embarrassing this entire family. The words hit me like a physical blow, echoing across the crowded backyard where 30-plus relatives had suddenly gone dead silent. My grandmother's voice carried that special kind of venom she reserved for moments when she had the biggest audience possible. I stood there frozen, holding a paper plate with a single burger I'd finally worked up the courage to grab after an hour of internal debate. At 19, I'd driven 4 hours to attend my first family reunion in 3 years, telling myself things might be different now. That maybe I was strong enough to handle whatever came my way. I was wrong. Grandma Martha, that's enough. My cousin Jake's voice sounded distant, like he was speaking through water. Don't you tell me what's enough, she snapped back, her steel-gray eyes never leaving my face. Look at the size of this child. It's disgraceful. And now she's piling food on her plate like she hasn't eaten in weeks. The burger felt like it weighed 50 pounds. My face burned with humiliation as I felt every pair of eyes in the yard boring into me. Some relatives looked uncomfortable, others pretended to be fascinated by their potato salad, and a few were clearly enjoying the show. I started to speak, but my voice cracked. You just what? You just thought you'd come here and stuff your face while decent people are trying to enjoy themselves. Martha's wheelchair creaked as she rolled closer to me. At 84, my grandmother still commanded attention like a general surveying her troops. Your mother should be ashamed of herself, letting you get to this state. That's when the tears started. Not the gentle, quiet kind you can hide, the ugly, shoulder-shaking sobs that make your nose run and your breathing come in gasps. The burger slipped from my plate and hit the grass with a pathetic splat. I can't do this, I whispered, and stumbled toward the house. That's right, run away. Martha called after me. Just like you run away from every problem instead of facing it. I made it to the bathroom before completely falling apart. Locked the door and slid down against it, hyperventilating as 3 years of anxiety and self-doubt came crashing back. This was exactly why I'd stopped coming to family events. This was why I'd spent my freshman year of college eating alone in my dorm room instead of going to the dining hall where people might see me. Martha had been doing this my entire life. Fat comments disguised as concern for my health. Comparing me to my thinner cousins. Making jokes about my weight at birthday parties and holiday dinners while everyone else laughed uncomfortably or pretended not to hear. But this felt different. Worse. Maybe because I was technically an adult now, or because I'd really believed I was ready to face her, or because some small part of me had hoped college might have changed how she saw me. Through the thin bathroom door, I could hear the party slowly resuming. Conversation starting up again, kids running around, someone turning the music back on. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just been publicly destroyed by the family matriarch for the crime of existing in a body she found offensive. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and opened my text messages. My mom had been messaging me all morning, asking how the reunion was going, if I was having fun. Coming home early, I typed. Can't do this anymore. But as I sat there on that cold bathroom floor, something else was building underneath the humiliation and hurt. Something that felt almost like anger. The anger surprised me with its intensity. I'd spent so many years accepting Martha's cruelty as just the way she was that I'd forgotten I was allowed to be furious about it. I stayed in that bathroom for 20 minutes, ugly crying and having what I can only describe as an awakening. Every family gathering came flooding back, not just the weight comments, but all of it. The way Martha had reduced my cousin Sarah to tears at her high school graduation by criticizing her choice of college. How she told my Uncle Mike his divorce was predictable because he'd never had any backbone. The time she'd announced at Christmas dinner that my brother's girlfriend wasn't pretty enough for our family. She was a bully. A calculated, methodical bully who used family loyalty as a shield and her age as an excuse. And everyone just let her. When I finally emerged from the bathroom, I nearly walked straight into my Aunt Lisa, who was hovering in the hallway with a concerned expression. Honey, are you okay? I was just coming to check on you. I'm fine, I lied, then immediately felt stupid. My eyes were swollen, my face was blotchy, and I was clearly not fine. No, you're not. And you shouldn't have to be. Lisa glanced around, then lowered her voice. Listen, I know this probably doesn't help much, but most of us out there think what Martha said was completely out of line. Most of you. She had the grace to look embarrassed. Well, you know how it is with her. She's difficult. She's abusive, I said, surprised by my own directness. There's a difference. Lisa shifted uncomfortably. She's set in her ways, and she doesn't always think before she speaks. She knew exactly what she was doing. The clarity of it was almost startling. She waited until everyone was watching. She made sure her voice carried. That wasn't an accident. Before Lisa could respond, I heard Martha's voice drifting in from the backyard, already holding court again. She was telling some story about her bridge club, laughing and animated, like she hadn't just emotionally demolished her own granddaughter 15 minutes earlier. I need to get my purse, I said to Lisa. I'm leaving. Don't let her chase you away. You have every right to be here. But I was already walking toward the kitchen where I'd left my bag. Rights didn't matter much when exercising them meant volunteering for psychological warfare. As I grabbed my purse, I overheard my mom talking quietly with my dad near the sliding glass door. Can't keep making excuses for her, Mom was saying. Did you see what she did to our daughter out there? I should have said something. You know how Martha gets when anyone challenges her, Dad replied. Remember what happened when your brother tried to stand up to her at Mike's wedding? I don't care how she gets. That's my child, Tom. I felt a weird mix of vindication and frustration. It was nice to know my parents were upset on my behalf, but where was this protective instinct when I actually needed it? Why were they whispering in corners instead of confronting the woman who just publicly humiliated their daughter? That's when Martha's voice cut through the background noise again, sharp and commanding. Where did the girl go? I wasn't finished talking to her. The girl. Not my name. Not even my granddaughter. Just the girl, like I was some random person who'd wandered into her territory. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I could leave right now, drive back to college, and spend the rest of my life avoiding family events. Or I could walk back out there and face her. The decision surprised even me. Instead of heading for the front door, I found myself walking back toward the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. My hands were still shaking, but something had crystallized in those 20 minutes of bathroom floor enlightenment. I stepped back outside, and conversations gradually died down as people noticed my return. Martha was holding court near the dessert table, gesturing dramatically with a piece of apple pie, but her eyes found mine immediately. Well, well. Look who decided to rejoin us. Her voice dripped with false sweetness. Feeling better, dear. The endearment was poison wrapped in honey. I could feel the entire party watching this exchange like spectators at a tennis match. Actually, Grandma, I wanted to ask you something. My voice was steadier than I expected. Do you remember what you said to me when I was 12? Martha's eyes narrowed slightly. She clearly hadn't expected me to engage. I've said many things over the years, dear. You'll have to be more specific. At Uncle Mike's birthday party. You told me I was getting chunky and that boys would never like me if I didn't lose weight. The memory came back with perfect, painful clarity. I was 12, Grandma. I went home and didn't eat dinner for 3 days because I thought you might be right. The backyard had gone silent again, but this time it felt different. This wasn't the uncomfortable silence of witnessing a public shaming. This was the charged quiet of secrets being dragged into daylight. I was trying to help you develop self-discipline, Martha said, but her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Sometimes children need honest guidance. Honest guidance? I felt something unleash inside my chest. Is that what you call telling a 7th grader she's disgusting? I never said. You said I looked like a stuffed sausage in my dress. You said it in front of my cousins, and they laughed because they were scared if they didn't, you'd turn on them next. I saw Sarah's face go pale across the yard. She remembered. Martha's wheelchair creaked as she shifted, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this conversation was taking. You're being dramatic. And frankly, if you'd listened to my advice years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation now. The cruelty was so casual, so automatic, that it actually helped. Because suddenly I wasn't the only one reacting. I heard my Aunt Lisa make a small, shocked sound. My mom took a step forward, her face flushed with anger. Mom, that's enough, my dad said, his voice cutting through the tension. But Martha was looking at me now with something approaching respect, like I'd finally become interesting enough to warrant her full attention. What exactly are you trying to accomplish here, dear? Do you think having a little tantrum is going to change anything? I'm not trying to change you, Grandma. I've given up on that. The words came from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. I'm just done pretending this is normal. I'm done watching everyone walk on eggshells around you while you say horrible things to people who are supposed to matter to you. Supposed to matter. Her voice went dangerously quiet. I've done more for this family than you could possibly understand. I've sacrificed. You've terrorized, I interrupted, and the word hung in the air like smoke. You've spent years making sure everyone here is just a little bit afraid of you. Including me. Martha's face had gone rigid. Around us, I could see relatives exchanging glances, some looking uncomfortable, others nodding almost imperceptibly. You ungrateful little. What? I stepped closer to her wheelchair. What am I, Grandma? Say it in front of everyone. Show them exactly who you really are. For the first time in my life, I watched my grandmother struggle for words. The standoff stretched between us like a taut wire. Martha's mouth opened and closed twice before she finally found her voice, but when she spoke, it wasn't the explosion I'd expected. You want to know who you really are? Her voice dropped to that whisper-quiet tone that somehow felt more menacing than shouting. You're a disappointment. A weak, pathetic disappointment who's never accomplished anything worth mentioning. I felt the familiar sting, but something had shifted. The words still hurt, but they didn't devastate me the way they used to. Maybe because I was finally seeing her clearly, not as the family matriarch whose approval I desperately needed, but as a bitter old woman who gained power by tearing others down. At least I'm not cruel, I said quietly. At least I don't spend my time making children hate themselves. Oh, please. Martha rolled her eyes dramatically. Everything is child abuse these days. In my day, we called it honesty. We called it preparing young people for the real world. The real world doesn't have to be as ugly as the one you live in. That hit something. Martha's face flushed dark red, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a viciousness that made everyone in earshot take an unconscious step back. You think you're so wise now, don't you? Standing there lecturing me like you have any idea what real struggle looks like. She gestured broadly at the assembled family. Do you know what I've done for these people? What I've sacrificed? I put 3 children through college when your grandfather died and left us with nothing. I worked 2 jobs for 15 years so this family could have something to build on. That doesn't give you the right. It gives me the right to speak truth when I see someone throwing their life away. Martha's voice rose to that commanding boom again. You want to play victim? Fine. But don't expect me to pretend your problems are anyone's fault but your own. Around us, the family was watching this nuclear detonation with expressions ranging from horror to fascination. My cousin Jake was filming with his phone, probably for TikTok, knowing him. My mom looked like she was debating whether to intervene or let this play out. But it was my Uncle Steve who surprised everyone by speaking up. Mom, you need to stop. His voice was steady but firm. This isn't helping anyone. Martha whipped around to face him. Don't you dare tell me what I need to do, Stephen. I'm still your mother. Being my mother doesn't give you the right to be cruel to my niece. Cruel. Martha laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to see cruel? Try raising children alone while working yourself to death because your husband was too weak to stick around. Dad didn't choose to have a heart attack, my mom said, stepping forward. And taking your grief out on everyone else for the past 20 years isn't honoring his memory. The air felt electric. I realized I wasn't just witnessing my own confrontation with Martha anymore, I was watching decades of suppressed resentment finally bubble to the surface. Unbelievable, Martha muttered. My own children, turning against me because this girl can't handle a little honest feedback. It wasn't honest feedback, my cousin Sarah said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. It was mean. You've always been mean, Grandma. We just never said anything because we were scared. Martha's face went through several expressions before settling on cold fury. Scared? Of me? That's ridiculous. Is it? Sarah's voice grew stronger. Remember when you told me I was too stupid for nursing school? I almost didn't apply because of what you said. I almost gave up on my dream because you convinced me I wasn't smart enough. I was protecting you from disappointment. You were protecting yourself from having to be supportive, I said, the realization hitting me like lightning. It's easier to tear people down than to build them up. Easier to make everyone else feel small so you can feel big. Martha's wheelchair creaked ominously as she turned back to face me. When she spoke, her voice carried a finality that made my skin crawl. You want to know what your real problem is? It's not your weight. It's that you're just like your grandfather, weak, spineless, and too sensitive for your own good. And just like him, you'll never amount to anything because you don't have what it takes. The words hit their target perfectly. But instead of crumbling, I felt something cold and determined settle in my chest. You know what, Grandma? You're right about one thing. I am done being weak. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app, hitting record. Could you repeat that last part? About me being like Grandpa? I'd love to get that on tape for posterity. Martha's eyes narrowed dangerously. Put that thing away. Why? I thought you believed in honesty. Put that phone away right now, Martha hissed, but I could hear something new in her voice, uncertainty. No. The word felt foreign coming out of my mouth. I'd never said no to her before. You've been saying horrible things to me my entire life, and now I want proof. Go ahead, tell everyone again how weak and pathetic I am. Martha's hands gripped her wheelchair armrest so tightly her knuckles went white. You little brat, I said, put it away. Make me. I held the phone higher, making sure the microphone could pick up everything. Come on, Grandma. Show everyone the real Martha Henderson. Tell me how disgusting I am. Tell my cousin Sarah how stupid she is. Tell Uncle Mike about his failed marriage. The family was staring at us like we were two gladiators in an arena. My mom had gone completely pale, probably realizing this confrontation had spun far beyond anything she could control. You're recording this? Martha's voice cracked slightly. At a family gathering? Why not? You never had a problem humiliating me in front of everyone before. What's different about having evidence of it? For the first time in my life, I watched my grandmother look genuinely flustered. She kept glancing between my phone and the faces around us, as if calculating something. This is inappropriate, she stammered. Family business should stay in the family. Exactly. I took a step closer, still recording. So go ahead and share your honest feedback, Grandma. Tell the family how you really feel about all of us. Martha's mouth opened and closed several times. Around us, I could see relatives pulling out their own phones. My cousin Jake was definitely still filming. Even quiet Aunt Linda had her camera app open. The power dynamic had completely flipped, and Martha knew it. Turn those off, she demanded, looking around frantically. All of you, turn them off right now. But Grandma, Sarah said sweetly, you always taught us to document important family moments. Martha whirled toward her. Don't you get smart with me, young lady. See? I said to my phone's camera. This is what family dinners are like. This is how she talks to everyone when she doesn't get her way. Stop it. Martha's voice was rising toward panic. Stop recording me this instant. Why? What are you afraid of? The question hung in the air like a challenge. If you're just giving honest guidance, why don't you want people to hear it? Martha went silent for a long moment, her eyes darting between all the cameras pointed at her. When she finally spoke, her voice had taken on a different quality, calculating and cold. You think you're clever, don't you? Recording your own grandmother like some kind of criminal. She straightened in her wheelchair, trying to reclaim her authority. Fine. You want honesty? Here's some honesty for you. My stomach clenched, but I kept the phone steady. You've always been the weakest link in this family. Weak, needy, and desperate for attention. And now you're proving it by creating drama at a family gathering because you can't handle a little constructive criticism. There we go, I said to the camera. Everyone's getting this, right? The way she talks about her own granddaughter. But Martha wasn't done. You want to know what your real problem is? It's not just your weight. It's your attitude. Your complete inability to take responsibility for your own life. Your constant victim mentality. Each word was carefully chosen, designed to cut deep while sounding just reasonable enough that she could claim she was being helpful. It was masterful manipulation, and I was capturing every second of it. Keep going, I encouraged. Tell everyone how you really feel. Martha's eyes glittered with something dangerous. Oh, I will. Because maybe it's time this family heard some uncomfortable truths about what happens when you enable weakness instead of addressing it. She was about to say something else when my Uncle Steve stepped forward. Mom, stop. You're making this worse. Worse for who, Stephen? For her. Martha gestured at me dismissively. Or worse for you because you're finally seeing what you've all been too cowardly to address. The recording was still running, capturing everything. Actually, Grandma, Uncle Steve said, his voice getting that dangerous quiet tone I'd only heard him use once before, I think it's time we addressed some uncomfortable truths about you. My phone was still recording, but suddenly I wasn't the main attraction anymore. Everyone's attention had shifted to Steve, who was looking at Martha with an expression I'd never seen before, not fear, not resignation, but something that looked almost like disgust. Stephen, Martha said, her voice carrying a warning. Don't do something you'll regret. Regret? Steve laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Mom, I've been regretting my silence for 20 years. The family was completely frozen now. Even the kids had stopped running around to stare at this unprecedented challenge to Martha's authority. My cousin Jake had lowered his phone, apparently sensing that whatever was about to happen was bigger than TikTok material. You want to talk about weakness? Steve continued, taking a step closer to Martha's wheelchair. Let's talk about a woman who's so insecure about her own failures that she spends every family gathering tearing down teenagers. How dare you? I'm not done. Steve's voice cut through her protest like a blade. You want to know why Dad really had that heart attack, Mom? It wasn't just bad genetics. It was stress. Stress from living with someone who made every day a battle, who turned every conversation into an opportunity to prove how superior she was. Martha's face went white. Your father loved me. Dad was terrified of you. We all were. We still are. Steve gestured around the silent backyard. Look at them, Mom. Look at your own family. Everyone's walking on eggshells because they're afraid you'll turn on them next. I kept my phone steady, hardly believing what I was witnessing. Uncle Steve had always been the peacekeeper, the one who changed the subject when Martha got mean, who made jokes to diffuse tension. Seeing him finally explode was like watching a dam burst. You're upset, Martha said, trying to regain control. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. Steve pulled out his own phone, and my heart started racing. You know what, Mom? You're right about documentation. Some things should be recorded. Stephen, don't you dare. Remember the education fund, everyone. Steve's voice carried across the yard like a bell. The one Dad set up for all the grandchildren's college expenses. The one that was supposed to have about $40,000 in it by now. Martha went very still. Stephen, this is not the time. When is the time, Mom? When is it ever the time to talk about uncomfortable truths? Steve was scrolling through his phone now, pulling up something. Because I've been managing the family finances for 2 years, and I've been finding some very interesting discrepancies. The word discrepancies hung in the air like smoke. I saw my mom and dad exchange a look that made my stomach clench. Around us, relatives were starting to murmur, confused whispers rippling through the crowd. You don't know what you're talking about, Martha said, but her voice had lost all its commanding authority. She sounded scared. Don't I? Steve held up his phone screen, though I couldn't see what was on it from where I stood. Because according to these bank statements, someone's been making regular withdrawals from the education fund for the past 18 months. Someone with authorized access. The murmuring got louder. My cousin Sarah moved closer, trying to see Steve's phone. What kind of withdrawals? 1,500 here, 2,000 there. Always just small enough to avoid triggering any automatic notifications. Steve's eyes never left Martha's face. But they add up. Boy, do they add up. Martha's hands were gripping her wheelchair arms so tightly I thought she might leave permanent marks in the metal. There were expenses. Legitimate family expenses that. Like what, Mom? Steve's voice was relentless. Because I can account for every legitimate family expense we've had. This money went somewhere else entirely. My recording was still running, capturing everything, but I felt like I was watching a movie. This couldn't be real. Martha couldn't have been stealing from us. From her own grandchildren's future. You're making a terrible mistake, Martha whispered, but the fight had gone out of her voice. The only mistake I made was keeping quiet about it this long. Steve looked around at all of us, his expression grim. She's been funding her lifestyle with money that was meant to pay for college tuition. Money Dad specifically set aside for the kids' education. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. The phone in my hand was still recording, but I'd almost forgotten about it entirely. Steve's revelation was so massive, so completely unexpected, that my brain was struggling to process it. That's impossible, my mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom wouldn't, she knows how important that fund is to the kids. But even as she said it, I could see doubt creeping into her expression. Around the yard, relatives were starting to connect dots they'd apparently been ignoring for months. The cruise, Aunt Lisa said suddenly. Remember that expensive cruise you took last winter, Mom? You said you'd been saving up for it, but I wondered how you could afford something that fancy on your fixed income. Martha's face had gone from white to gray. That cruise was a gift. From the senior center. The senior center doesn't give away $5,000 cruises, Steve said flatly. He was scrolling through more screens on his phone, his jaw getting tighter with each swipe. And what about the new furniture in your apartment? The designer handbags? The weekly salon appointments? I deserve nice things, Martha snapped, but her voice cracked. I worked my entire life for this family. I sacrificed everything. You sacrificed our children's futures, my dad interrupted, and the anger in his voice made everyone go silent again. Tom's starting college next year. Sarah's got 2 more years left. Jake's only 15, for God's sake. The weight of it was starting to hit me. That fund wasn't just some abstract family account, it was my brother's chance at graduating without crushing debt. It was Jake's hope of going to the art school he'd been dreaming about since middle school. It was Sarah's ability to finish her nursing degree without working 3 jobs. And Martha had been treating it like her personal ATM. How much? I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. How much did you take? Steve looked at his phone again, then at me. As of last week's statement, about $26,000. The number hit like a physical blow. I heard Sarah make a choking sound. Aunt Lisa actually staggered backward like she'd been slapped. 26,000, my mom repeated numbly. Mom, that's more than half the fund. It's not gone forever, Martha said desperately. I was planning to pay it back. I just needed some temporary assistance while I got my finances sorted out. Temporary? Steve's voice was incredulous. Mom, you've been doing this for a year and a half. And your finances aren't unsorted, I've seen your budget. You make enough to live comfortably. You just wanted more. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. I looked around at my family, really looked at them, and saw the exact moment when everyone's perception of Martha shifted permanently. You stole from us, Sarah said, her voice hollow with disbelief. You actually stole money from your own grandchildren. I did not steal anything. Martha's voice rose to that commanding boom again, but it sounded desperate now instead of authoritative. That money was sitting in an account doing nothing. I needed. You needed designer handbags more than Jake needs college tuition. My mom's voice was getting dangerous. You needed spa days more than Tom needs textbooks. Martha's mouth opened and closed several times. For the first time in my life, I was watching her struggle to construct a defense that made her sound like anything other than exactly what she was. And my phone was recording every second of her desperate scrambling. The worst part, Steve continued, pulling up another screen on his phone, is that she's been sitting in on our family financial meetings for months, listening to us worry about college costs, watching Sarah stress about her student loans, and she never said a word. I watched Martha's face cycle through emotions, panic, rage, calculation. She was looking for an angle, some way to spin this that would put her back in control. You're all overreacting, she said finally, but her voice had lost its usual steel. Family money should be used for family needs. I had legitimate expenses. What legitimate expenses required designer purses? Aunt Lisa's voice was shaking. What family emergency required weekly manicures and premium cable packages? I raised 3 ungrateful children and helped raise half these grandchildren, Martha shot back, some of her old venom returning. I think I've earned the right to enjoy my golden years without being interrogated like a criminal. You are a criminal, Jake said suddenly. At 15, my cousin rarely spoke up at family gatherings, but his voice carried a clarity that made everyone turn. That's literally what stealing is, Grandma. It's a crime. Martha's face flushed dark red. How dare you speak to me that way, young man? After everything I've done for this family. What you've done is betray us, my mom interrupted. While we've been scrimping and saving, taking extra shifts and eating ramen so we could contribute to the kids' education fund, you've been treating it like your personal slush fund. The revelation was recontextualizing every family interaction from the past year. I thought about my parents having hushed conversations about money, my mom picking up overtime shifts at the hospital, my dad putting off replacing his ancient work boots because every extra dollar was going toward my college expenses. Wait, Sarah said, her nursing student brain clearly working through the timeline. The fund statements. Don't we get quarterly reports? How did nobody notice $26,000 missing? Steve's expression grew even grimmer. Because Mom's been handling the fund correspondence. She said it would be easier to have everything sent to one address, and we trusted her to distribute the statements to everyone. The scope of the deception was breathtaking. This wasn't just theft, it was a carefully orchestrated scheme to cover the tracks. You've been intercepting our mail, my dad's voice was barely controlled fury. Our financial statements. I simplified the process, Martha said defensively. There was no need for everyone to get confused by complicated bank paperwork. Confused? Aunt Lisa's voice pitched higher. We're adults, Mom. We can read bank statements. But Martha was already shifting tactics, her survival instincts kicking in. This entire conversation is inappropriate. We're family. These matters should be discussed privately, not aired in front of everyone like some kind of public trial. Like the way you publicly humiliated me earlier. The words came out before I could stop them. Funny how privacy only matters when it's your reputation on the line. Martha's eyes snapped to me with renewed viciousness. This has nothing to do with your little drama, young lady. This is a complex financial matter that requires adult understanding. Adult understanding? I held up my still recording phone. You mean like understanding that stealing is wrong? Because I'm pretty sure I learned that in kindergarten. Around us, I could see relatives pulling out calculators, probably trying to figure out how this would impact their own kids' college plans. The education fund wasn't just symbolic, it was the difference between achievable dreams and crushing debt for an entire generation of our family. Steve, my mom said quietly, do we know if any of this money can be recovered? The question hung in the air like a sword. Martha's wheelchair creaked as she shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing that legal implications were starting to enter the conversation. That depends, Steve said, his eyes never leaving Martha's face, on whether certain people are willing to cooperate. Martha's face went through several emotions before settling on cold calculation. Cooperate with what, exactly? You're talking like this is some kind of criminal investigation. It is a criminal investigation if we decide to make it one, Steve said quietly. Theft of this magnitude isn't just a family dispute, Mom. It's a felony. The word felony hit the gathering like a bomb. I watched relatives exchange panicked glances, probably realizing this had escalated far beyond typical family drama. My phone was still recording, capturing every damning word. You wouldn't dare, Martha hissed. You wouldn't drag your own mother through the courts over a simple misunderstanding. Simple. Sarah's voice cracked. $26,000 is simple. But I could see Martha's wheels turning. She was scanning the faces around her, calculating who might be sympathetic, who she could manipulate. Her eyes lingered on my dad, who'd always been the softest touch when it came to family conflict. Tommy, she said, her voice suddenly taking on that fragile, elderly woman tone she used when she wanted something. Surely you can see that this is all being blown out of proportion. I made some mistakes, yes, but nothing that can't be worked out between family members. My dad's jaw tightened. Don't try to manipulate me, Martha. Not after what you've done. What I've done is survive on a fixed income while watching all of you live comfortable lives, she snapped, the mask slipping again. Do you have any idea what it's like to watch your children succeed while you're counting pennies? You weren't counting pennies, Aunt Lisa said incredulously. You were spending money that wasn't yours on luxury items while we were all sacrificing for our kids' futures. Martha's wheelchair turned toward Lisa with predatory focus. And what exactly have you sacrificed, Lisa? Your twice-weekly yoga classes. Your organic grocery budget. I work 60 hours a week so Emily can afford textbooks without going into debt, Lisa shot back. I haven't bought new clothes in 2 years. I drive a car that's held together with duct tape and prayer. That's your choice. No, it's my responsibility. Something you apparently don't understand anymore. I watched Martha's face cycle through rage and panic. She was losing control of the narrative, and everyone could see her scrambling for purchase. You know what the real problem is? Martha's voice rose to that commanding boom again. None of you understand what real sacrifice looks like. I worked myself to the bone after your father died, and now that I'm finally trying to enjoy what little time I have left, you want to crucify me for it. Enjoy it with stolen money, Jake said flatly. Martha whirled toward him, her eyes blazing. Don't you dare judge me, young man. When you've lived as long as I have, when you've given as much as I have, then you can lecture me about right and wrong. I know stealing is wrong, Jake replied with devastating simplicity. Age doesn't change that. The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically see Martha's authority crumbling in real time, 20 years of fear-based control dissolving as people realized the emperor had no clothes. This is what happens, she said desperately, when you raise children without proper discipline. They grow up thinking they can disrespect their elders without consequences. The only consequence here, my mom said quietly, should be you figuring out how to return what you stole. Martha's hands gripped her wheelchair arms. And if I can't? What then? Are you really going to destroy this family over money? The question hung in the air like a challenge, and I realized this was her final play, emotional blackmail disguised as family loyalty. You already destroyed it, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. The minute you decided we were worth less than your comfort. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Martha's face went through a series of micro-expressions, shock, rage, calculation, before settling on something I'd never seen from her before, genuine fear. You don't understand what you're saying, she whispered, but her voice carried none of its usual authority. This family has been through worse than. Has it? Uncle Steve interrupted, pulling up another screen on his phone. Because I've been digging deeper since we started talking, Mom, and there's more. My stomach dropped. More. How could there possibly be more? The Christmas fund, Steve continued, his voice getting darker. The one we all contribute to for the kids' presents. That had mysterious administrative fees last year that ate up almost half the balance. I watched Sarah's face go white. That's why there were barely any presents under the tree. You said it was because people forgot to contribute. People didn't forget, Steve said grimly. The money was there. It just got redirected. Martha's wheelchair creaked ominously as she tried to back away from the growing circle of family members. Those were legitimate expenses. Managing multiple accounts requires. Requires what? $1,000 management fee to move money between accounts. Steve's voice was relentless. Mom, I've been a bank manager for 15 years. I know what legitimate fees look like. The revelation hit like a second bomb. I could see relatives frantically trying to calculate how much money they'd unknowingly contributed to Martha's lifestyle over the years. Birthday funds, holiday accounts, the emergency family fund, how many of those had she been skimming from? This is harassment, Martha said desperately. You're ganging up on an elderly woman over bookkeeping discrepancies. Bookkeeping discrepancies? My mom's voice pitched higher. You stole Christmas from your own grandchildren. But Martha was already pivoting again, her survival instincts in overdrive. And what exactly do you plan to do about it? Are you really going to call the police on your own mother? Drag me through court in front of the entire community? The threat was clear, she was betting that family loyalty would protect her from real consequences. That our fear of public embarrassment would keep her crimes hidden. Actually, Jake said quietly, holding up his phone, I think we're past worrying about public embarrassment. My blood ran cold. Jake, what do you mean? He looked around nervously, clearly realizing he'd said something significant. I mean, I've been streaming this whole thing on TikTok. Since the beginning. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. You've been what? My mom whispered. It was supposed to just be about family reunion drama, but then when she started talking about the money. Jake's voice trailed off as he looked at his screen. Oh shit. There are like 2,000 people watching right now. Martha made a sound like a dying animal. Turn it off. Turn it off right now. I can't just turn it off, Jake said, panic creeping into his voice. It's live. And people are screen recording. They're asking questions about the money stuff. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. This had started as a family confrontation and somehow become a public spectacle. Martha's face had gone from gray to green, and I could practically see her calculating the social destruction heading her way. Delete it, she demanded, her voice rising to a shriek. Delete everything right now. That's not how the internet works, Grandma, Jake said helplessly. Once it's out there. Then we're all ruined. Martha's composure finally shattered completely. Do you understand what you've done? What you've done to this entire family? But even as she raged, I could see people in the background of Jake's stream, commenting faster than he could read them. The comments on Jake's stream were flooding in faster than anyone could read them, but the few I caught over his shoulder made my stomach churn. Someone call the police. This is elder abuse. The family is attacking a disabled woman. Context. What happened before this? Martha's eyes were fixed on Jake's phone screen, and I could see her expression shift as she read the comments. The terror was being replaced by something else, calculation. You see, she said, her voice suddenly taking on that fragile, victimized tone. You see how this looks to normal people? A disabled elderly woman being attacked by her own family? My blood ran cold as I realized what was happening. The stream had started in the middle of our confrontation. Viewers had no context for why we were angry, no record of her earlier cruelty or the theft revelations. They were seeing what looked like a family ganging up on a vulnerable old woman. Jake, end the stream, my mom said urgently. Right now. I'm trying. Jake was frantically tapping his screen. But it's not responding, and there are like 5,000 people watching now. It's going viral. Martha straightened in her wheelchair, and I watched 20 years of manipulation tactics kick into overdrive. When she spoke again, her voice carried just the right mixture of confusion and hurt. I don't understand why everyone is so angry with me, she said, making sure her voice would carry to Jake's microphone. I've tried to help this family my whole life, and now they're saying such terrible things. Don't you dare, I said, stepping closer. Don't you dare play victim after what you've done. But Martha had found her angle. She looked directly at Jake's camera, tears actually forming in her eyes. I don't know what I did wrong. We were having such a nice family gathering, and then everyone started yelling at me about money I don't understand. The comments were shifting. I could see Jake's face growing pale as he read them. Poor grandma. This is disgusting, leave her alone. Family is ganging up on her. Where are the adults? Why is no one protecting her? She's being smart, Uncle Steve said grimly, watching Martha's performance. She's rewriting the narrative in real time. Martha dabbed at her eyes with a tissue that had mysteriously appeared from somewhere. I just want my family to love me. I don't understand all this talk about banks and stealing. I would never steal from my own grandchildren. You literally just admitted, Sarah started, but Martha cut her off. I admitted to making some mistakes with paperwork, dear. That's very different from what you're all accusing me of. She looked back at the camera. Sometimes when you get to be my age, financial matters can become confusing. I felt like I was watching a masterclass in manipulation. She was using every weapon in her arsenal, age, disability, confusion, victimhood, to completely reframe the situation for an audience that had no context. The bank statements, my dad said desperately. Steve, show them the bank statements. But Steve was shaking his head. You can't read bank account numbers clearly on a phone camera. And even if we could, showing someone else's financial information on a live stream could get us in legal trouble. Martha smiled, actually smiled, and I realized she knew exactly what she was doing. I don't understand why they want to share my private information with strangers. That seems very inappropriate. The trap was perfect. Anything we said to defend ourselves would look like we were attacking a confused elderly woman. Any evidence we tried to present would seem like a violation of her privacy. And the original context, her vicious attack on me, her years of cruelty, was lost forever. Jake, I said urgently, tell them what she said to me earlier. Tell them how this started. But Jake was staring at his phone in horror. There are 10,000 people watching now. And someone's calling the police. They think we're abusing her. Through the phone's speaker, I could hear sirens in the distance. The sirens were getting closer, and I watched Martha's face transform into a mask of perfect innocence. She had orchestrated this beautifully. In less than 10 minutes, she'd gone from exposed thief to sympathetic victim, all while 10,000 strangers watched. Oh dear, she said, loud enough for Jake's microphone to pick up, I hope no one called the authorities over our little family disagreement. That seems so extreme. But I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. She'd weaponized the very technology that was supposed to expose her, turning our evidence into our downfall. Everyone needs to stop talking, Uncle Steve said urgently. Right now. Don't say anything else on camera. Too late. The comments were a tsunami of outrage directed at us. Call Adult Protective Services. This is disgusting. Poor woman is being terrorized. The granddaughter looks unhinged. I felt physically sick reading them. Everything we'd said, every justified accusation, was being reinterpreted through the lens of what looked like family abuse. Martha's performance was Academy Award worthy, the confused, frightened elderly woman being attacked by ungrateful relatives. Jake, seriously, end the stream, my mom pleaded. The app crashed. Jake was frantically tapping his screen. It's frozen, but people are still watching. They're screen recording everything. The sirens stopped. Car doors slammed in the driveway. Remember, Martha said quietly, but not quietly enough to escape the microphone, we're family. Family protects each other. The threat was crystal clear. She'd created a situation where any attempt to tell the truth would make us look worse. And now the police were walking through our backyard, seeing what appeared to be a large group of adults surrounding one elderly woman in a wheelchair. Ma'am, we got a call about a possible elder abuse situation, the first officer said, his hand resting casually on his radio. Behind him, a second officer was already scanning the crowd, clearly assessing threat levels. Martha's transformation was instant and complete. Her voice took on a trembling quality I'd never heard before. Officers, I'm so sorry you were called out here. This is just a family misunderstanding that got a little heated. Are you injured, ma'am? Do you feel safe? The first officer moved closer to Martha's wheelchair, effectively positioning himself between her and the rest of us. I'm fine, just a bit shaken up, Martha said, dabbing at her eyes again. My family gets passionate about things sometimes, but they'd never hurt me. It was masterful. She was simultaneously playing the victim while appearing magnanimous about our mistake. Every word made us look worse. We're going to need to speak with everyone separately, the second officer announced, pulling out a notebook. Starting with whoever was live streaming this incident. Jake's face went white. I didn't know. I mean, it wasn't supposed to. Son, you need to turn off that camera right now, the first officer said firmly. This is an active investigation. It won't turn off. Jake's voice cracked. The app is frozen but it's still broadcasting. Both officers exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. A live stream of a police response to elder abuse allegations, this was about to become a social media nightmare of epic proportions. We need to confiscate that phone as evidence, the second officer said, reaching for Jake's device. Wait, Sarah said desperately, you don't understand. She stole money from us. From the kids' college fund. We have bank statements. Ma'am, please step back, the first officer said sharply. We'll get everyone's statement, but right now we need to secure the scene. Martha watched it all with those calculating eyes, occasionally letting out a small, theatrical sigh. She'd won. Completely, utterly, devastatingly won. And somewhere out there, 10,000 people were watching her victory in real time. The officer took Jake's phone, but the damage was already done. I could see neighbors starting to gather at the edge of our yard, drawn by the police cars and the commotion. Some were holding up their own phones, probably adding to the social media circus that was rapidly spinning out of control. Ma'am, can you tell us what happened here today? The first officer asked Martha, his voice gentle and protective. Martha's performance was flawless. Well, officer, we were having a lovely family reunion when some financial disagreements came up. My grandson there, she gestured weakly toward Jake, started recording everything and putting it on the internet without permission. I think people just got carried away. Financial disagreements. Like it was a dispute over splitting a dinner check instead of systematic theft. What kind of financial disagreements? The second officer asked, pen poised over his notebook. This was Martha's moment, and she seized it perfectly. Oh, you know how families can be about money. Some of the children are upset about how I've been managing some family accounts. They think I've made mistakes, but honestly, all those bank numbers and forms are so confusing at my age. I watched in horrified fascination as she painted herself as a confused elderly woman struggling with complex financial matters, rather than a calculating thief who'd been systematically stealing from her own grandchildren. We have documentation, Uncle Steve said desperately. Bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals. Sir, please don't interrupt while we're taking the complainant's statement, the first officer said firmly. You'll have your turn. But I could already see how this was going to play out. Martha had the sympathy advantage, elderly, disabled, apparently confused and frightened. We looked like a mob of angry relatives ganging up on a vulnerable woman. The optics were devastatingly bad. The thing is, officers, Martha continued, her voice taking on that fragile quality again, I've been trying to help this family for so long. When my husband died, I worked so hard to keep everyone together. Sometimes I think they forget that I'm not as sharp as I used to be. She was laying the groundwork for an incompetence defense while simultaneously making us look like heartless bullies. Every word was calculated to generate maximum sympathy while providing her with legal cover. Ma'am, do you have family members who help you manage your finances? The second officer asked. Well, I thought I did, Martha said with a meaningful glance toward Steve. But today they started accusing me of such terrible things. Stealing, they said. As if I would ever steal from my own grandchildren. Her voice broke slightly on the word grandchildren, and I wanted to scream. This woman who had just called me a fat pig in front of 30 people, who had systematically embezzled thousands of dollars from kids' college funds, was now performing grief at being falsely accused. We're going to need to see those bank statements, the first officer said to Steve. And we'll need to interview everyone who was present during this incident. All of this is being recorded by strangers on the internet, my mom said, gesturing helplessly toward the neighbors with their phones. Our family's private business is being broadcast live to thousands of people. That's another issue we'll need to address, the second officer acknowledged. Ma'am, he said to Martha, are you comfortable pressing charges for the unauthorized recording and streaming of your image? My blood turned to ice. Pressing charges? Against Jake? Against us? Martha's eyes glittered with something that looked suspiciously like satisfaction, but when she spoke, her voice was all wounded confusion. I don't want to hurt my family, officer. This has all been such a misunderstanding. Maybe we just need some time to work things out privately. The magnanimous victim act was perfect. She was positioning herself as the reasonable one while leaving the threat hanging in the air. She could press charges if she wanted to, but she was graciously choosing not to, for now. However, she continued, dabbing at her eyes, I am concerned about my safety if these accusations continue. Some of the things that were said today were quite hurtful. And there it was. The final trap. She was setting up a scenario where any future attempts to expose her theft could be framed as harassment or continued abuse of a vulnerable elderly person. The police officers exchanged another look, and I realized we were about to become the subjects of an elder abuse investigation. Martha had turned our moment of truth into our complete destruction, and she'd done it in front of an audience of thousands. The officer was reaching for his handcuffs when my phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. And again. Miss, I need you to put that phone away, the first officer said sternly. This is an active investigation. But I was staring at my screen in shock. Notifications were flooding in faster than I could read them, messages, tags, shares. Something was happening on social media that had nothing to do with Jake's frozen live stream. Officer, wait, I said desperately. I think you need to see this. Ma'am, step back from. No, please. Look. I held up my phone, showing the cascade of notifications. People are posting about her. About my grandmother. This isn't the first time she's been recorded. Martha's face went white. That's ridiculous. I don't know what she's talking about. But the officer was looking at my screen now, his expression shifting. What exactly are you seeing here? Someone recognized her from Jake's stream, I said, my heart racing. They're sharing other videos. Look. The first video that loaded made my stomach drop. It was security footage from what looked like a grocery store, showing Martha in her wheelchair screaming at a teenage cashier who was visibly crying. The timestamp was from just 2 weeks ago. That's taken out of context, Martha said quickly, but her voice had lost some of its fragile quality. That girl was being extremely rude. The second video was worse. Martha at what appeared to be a doctor's office, berating an elderly man in the waiting room for coughing. Someone had filmed it on their phone and posted it with the caption, Karen in a wheelchair terrorizes sick people. Officers, Uncle Steve said urgently, this is what we've been trying to tell you. This isn't a confused elderly woman having a bad day. This is a pattern. More videos kept loading. Martha cutting in line at the DMV and screaming when confronted. Martha calling the police on a neighbor's birthday party at 3 in the afternoon. Martha threatening to sue a restaurant because her soup was too hot. The internet remembers everything, Sarah said quietly. And apparently, everyone's been recording her for months. I watched Martha's carefully constructed victim narrative crumble in real time. The comments on the videos were brutal but telling. OMG, that's the woman from the live stream. She's been terrorizing our whole neighborhood for years. Finally someone's calling her out. This woman threatened to have my dog put down because it barked once. The first officer was scrolling through the videos on my phone, his expression growing darker. Ma'am, are you Martha Henderson of 425, Maple Street? Martha's wheelchair creaked as she shifted uncomfortably. I don't see how my address is relevant. Because we've responded to 17 complaints filed by someone at that address in the past 6 months, the second officer said, suddenly pulling up something on his own phone. Noise complaints, harassment allegations, threats of legal action, all filed by you. The pieces were falling into place for everyone watching. Martha wasn't a confused elderly victim, she was a serial abuser who had finally picked the wrong target. This changes things significantly, the first officer said grimly. Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us to answer some questions about these financial allegations. You can't arrest me based on internet videos. Martha's voice rose to that commanding boom again, all pretense of fragility abandoned. This is harassment. I demand to speak to your supervisor. But the damage was done. The crowd of neighbors was murmuring, some calling out their own stories of Martha's behavior. Jake's live stream was still running, now capturing her complete meltdown as years of consequence finally caught up with her. Actually, ma'am, the second officer said, we can detain you for questioning. Especially when there are allegations of financial fraud involving this amount of money. Martha's face went from white to purple. The mask had slipped completely, and everyone could see exactly who she really was. Including the 10,000 people still watching online. The next few hours were a blur of police interviews, bank records, and social media chaos. While Martha was being questioned at the station, Uncle Steve worked with the officers to compile evidence of the financial fraud. The internet, meanwhile, had turned Martha into the week's biggest villain. By evening, the truth was undeniable. Martha had stolen nearly $30,000 across multiple family accounts over 18 months. The police found evidence of her systematic deception, intercepted bank statements, forged signatures on withdrawal slips, even a secret safety deposit box where she'd been hiding luxury items bought with our money. But the real victory came when our extended family started talking. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years reached out, sharing their own stories of Martha's cruelty. The family group chat exploded with decades of suppressed memories, cruel comments, manipulative behavior, and financial irregularities that suddenly made sense. Martha was charged with felony theft and financial exploitation of a family member. But more importantly, something had broken in the family's collective psychology. The spell she'd held over us for 20 years was finally shattered. The reunion's aftermath was swift and decisive. Within a week, Martha had been removed from all family financial accounts. Uncle Steve and my dad took over managing the education fund and discovered Martha had been planning to drain it completely within 6 months. We'd caught her just in time. The family meeting 3 weeks later was unlike any gathering we'd ever had. Martha wasn't invited, she was facing criminal charges and had been moved to a supervised living facility while awaiting trial. For the first time in my memory, we could talk without walking on eggshells. I can't believe we let this go on for so long, my mom said, shaking her head. The things she said to you kids over the years. We were scared, Aunt Lisa admitted. She had this way of making you feel like questioning her meant destroying the family. Sarah spoke up, her voice steady. I've been in therapy since the reunion. My therapist says what Martha did is called coercive control. She kept us all in line by making examples out of whoever challenged her. I looked around at my family, really looked at them, and saw people who were finally free to be themselves. Jake was showing my dad his art without fear of criticism. Sarah was talking about her nursing program with excitement instead of defensive justification. Even the adults seemed lighter, laughing more easily. There's something else, Uncle Steve said, pulling out a thick folder. Martha signed a confession in exchange for reduced jail time. She's agreed to pay restitution, and she's officially signed away any claim to family inheritance or financial access. The paperwork made it official. Martha Henderson was no longer welcome at family gatherings, no longer had access to any shared resources, and no longer held any authority over anyone. 6 months later, at Jake's art show opening, someone brought up Martha's name. But instead of the old fearful silence, people just shrugged and changed the subject. She'd become irrelevant. How are you doing with all this? My cousin Sarah asked me as we looked at Jake's paintings. I thought about it seriously. The weight comment still stung sometimes, and I was working with a therapist to rebuild my self-esteem. But something fundamental had changed in me that day at the reunion. I'm proud of us, I said finally. We could have kept protecting her reputation and enabling her behavior. Instead, we chose truth. Sarah nodded. Even when the truth was ugly. Especially then, I agreed. That night, I deleted the recording from my phone. I didn't need evidence of Martha's cruelty anymore. The important part wasn't what she'd done to us, it was what we'd finally done for ourselves. We'd chosen freedom over fear. And that made all the difference.